Having a look at my watch, I will jump to the final conclusion, so don't worry about it. Now, let me start with saying the following. Yesterday we had a great night, I think, until, well, Edgar's cut himself and we had to go to the hospital. But it was very nice, and I wanted to say thank you to the Portuguese and to the Latvian group, because it was nice to get the port wine, to get the food, to do the nice activities. So thank you very much for that, and I think we can also give you a little hand on it. Then second thank you note is going out to Osma for your presentation yesterday. And it made me realize that it's actually kind of nice to have a little start into it. And I'm going to start with my favorite quote from my favorite book. And that's the Little Prince. Men have no more time to understand anything. They buy things already made at the shops. But there's no shops anywhere where one can buy friendship. And so men have no friends anymore. If you want a friend, tame me. What must I do to tame you? Asked the little prince. You must be very patient, replied the fox. Que faut-il faire, dit le petit prince. Il faut être très patient, répondit le renard. So, since I now have your attention, I guess. Let me tell you what I want to achieve today with this presentation. It is first of all to give you some subject-oriented input and introduce you to a method of political education. Since this is my subject I study in school, it's also kind of my passion, and I know lots of you don't study political education and maybe are not somehow related to the topic, but still I think it's a way to both give you subject-oriented input and also show you how we can use the Web 2.0 in schools, and that's what the conference is about. So I hope I can realize those two aims. And it's also the reason why I choose my title for this presentation like this. It's going to be the Political Village 2.0, an introduction to political learning with web support. And here's an outline of what I'm going to do. It's two different parts. The first one is to show you the method. It's called the Political Village. I will introduce you to the aims of the method. I will show you the procedure without web support. And then I will talk about specifics and difficulties of the method. And this work is being done by Professor Dr. Andreas Patrick. He's a professor of social studies education in Germany. And basically what I'm going to present to you in the first part, it is his work. He did it during the last decade. I heard Professor Patrick when I was in my second year of school. He came to our university and talked about the method, and I got really interested in it. And since then, I did several internships, and I also had the possibility to kind of try it out myself with students, and I think it's really successful. That's why I'm very interested in it and also choose this presentation. Now, the second part that I'm going to talk to you in approximately 30 minutes is the Political Village 2.0. It takes the results from the first part of the presentation and tries to connect it to web-enhanced learning. And I will also talk a little bit about the exemplary nature of this project. And that is my work, which I prepared for Linz. So you can very well criticize me on the second part, because just my ideas that I had before coming here. So maybe if you have time left, there will be some kind of discussion, because I can imagine that you somehow see different ways of doing what I plan to do. So I'll start with the first part. It's the aim of the method. And it's about politics. And I know I broke the rules. Osma presented with this picture because it's probably kind of confusing, but that's what politics is like. I don't know if you had political education in school, but very often students can't tackle the subject because it's too big. And the method is about being and becoming political in the classroom. And Patrick says about it that politics is a difficult subject to face in school because different people have different interests. The basic question here is, how do we make politics understandable? In everyday life, students don't really understand what politics are, and even adults don't often understand how politicians make their decisions. So this is a question, or let's say the problem which this method is eager to face. How can we delve into politics? not by reading definitions out of a textbook, but by recognizing what politics actually is about, and to also point out the importance of politics in everyday life. So to illustrate you where we are going to, I have something for the boys. Lord of the Flies. It's a very famous book. Maybe some of you read it in school or read it in your free time. It's about boys go to Savage on an island. So there's elementary school students, and they break down with a ship, and they are stranding on an island. And then they have to find out what society is about, with no rules being there. And I also brought something for the girls. Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie The Beach, which probably some of you also know. It's about the same setting. That leads me to the Robinson idea. And the Robinson idea is based on the following question. Within an imaginary autonomous village, students have to form a society facing problems which they have to solve. So it's the idea of creating a new society. And by creating a new society, find out what rules we live by. Key questions can be who supports on what grounds, which positions, how can decisions be made, and that leads to the very big question, what is politics about? And here we go with a definition coming from political science, an American political scientist. He said politics is a question who gets what, when, where, and how. And if I can make the students to get to understand the sentence, not just by reading it out from a textbook, but discovering it for themselves, that's kind of the aim of the method where I'm going to. So let me wrap this up with a conclusion. There's a deserted village, the Robinson idea, and in that deserted village, students can learn basic political categories like power, freedom, equality, justice, and also latent orientations. So there are liberal orientations, there are socialist orientations, and all of them, I tried to show it to you on the picture, all of them add up to a political compass or a political map where you can understand behavior of people, and that's a question about why people do, on what grounds, what decisions. That's the last quotation for now. Students should learn about political values and defend them during discussion. When they notice the difficulties to find solutions for political issues, even in small groups like 25 or 30 students, they realize the big value of democracy as an historic accomplishment to mankind. And if the conclusion, the goal of the method, not clear until now, it will become clear, so don't worry about it. So now I will show you the procedure of the game, as you can call it, of the method in a short outline. It's a method that is, as Patrick said, it based for about 26 or 30 hours in school. So the idea is you have political education as a subject, and then maybe when you start with it, first lesson of school, the teacher can come and say, we're going to do a special method, we're going to do it for the next 8 weeks, and it's called the political village. And within the game, you have 3 different steps. First, you have to discover the political village. What is society about? Second one is to systemize your views you can get on that village. And third one is to apply what you learned from the village to the matter of political science. The category discover, you can also call it what matters for us. Throughout the following slides, I will show you what each of the steps is about. The first part is about finding a setting in which the game can take place after first arriving to the fictive mountain village. It's basically the topic of organization. How can we organize society? How can we organize living with each other? At the end of the first part is the task to have a list of things which the group must answer together. So obviously there will be questions that don't need to be answered by the group, private matters. But there are also matters which the group has to decide on. For example, how can we make decisions set a binding for every one of us. The students are supposed to get an idea of political compass to which ideologies give further input. That's the second category. It's systemize. What is left? What is right? Maybe also give some input about big ideologies, Marx, Burke, Smith, Proudhon. And the third one is actually the most interesting one. It's about applying those ideologies, theory-based ideologies, to problems that can arise in that fictive society in the mountain village. And let's see what every of those category is about. So when I start the game, I have an explanation of roles and setting. It will start like this. You have the picture. That's the mountain village we are traveling to. You ask the students to leave the student-based world and travel with you, of course, fictionist, to that village. And I also gave you a setting. So in that village, as you can see here, well, you have the village square, you have different houses, you have a town hall, but the village is empty. Nobody is there because the people left it years ago because they couldn't live there anymore. So you have the setting, but you don't have any humanity. And you also tell the students there's a sheet like role-playing cards. Some of them have a lot of money, which they got from their parents. Some of them don't have any money. So there's kind of a reflection of what society is in our world. And the students take those rules and they have to play them during the game. And then there are 5 different houses. And it's very special about the method that the teacher doesn't do that much. He's just, in the literature, he's considered a wise tree. So he's there, he's paying attention to what happened, but basically the students do all by themselves. So after they got the role-playing cards, you tell them, close your eyes. Now we are traveling. Open your eyes. Now we are in the village. And then the classroom is supposed to be the village. And well, it's really interesting what happens then, because first students don't really understand that the rules have gone. But once they find out about it, well, it becomes very, as you can see on the picture, it becomes very lively. Because the first task is, well, you're in the village and now find your houses. And the houses have different size. And well, how do you decide who gets what house if there are no rules? That's what the method is about at the beginning. So after it first come together, the question arises, how do we want to live? What rules shall be there? And how can we communicate? That's what it's all about in the beginning. So it becomes really loud and lively. And in the discovering part, basic question is then to find standing orders. It's about communication. How can we interact with each other without fighting, obviously? I mean, there needs to be some kind of discussion agreement, standing order. And after game introduction and the first discussions, students then reflect their behavior. And for that purpose, Patrick advises you to film the students while discussing. And that first discussion is really interesting if you have a look at it, because you can ask the students then, well, what is power? And it's a really abstract thing, power. I mean, probably all of us won't have an immediate answer on it. But then you see on the video reflection how the houses got divided. And you see that power, well, it's the ability to take something. And that's what that first part is about. So that's why it's called Discover. After that first step, and after everything settled a little bit and students calmed down a little bit, the next step is an agenda setting. And it's the basic questions, what decisions have to be made. But again, keep in mind, the special thing about this method is that not the teacher asks you, well, what do you have to decide? But the students find out what they have to decide by themselves. And the teacher is only there to pay attention if the game keeps running. If the students can't manage themselves to do anything, if they leave their roles and switch back to becoming normal students again, then the teacher is able to intervene but in general he is just the wise tree who is standing there, and students can come and ask him, but he is not to act on himself. So the agenda setting is about what decisions have to be made, and it can look like this. You collect the issues, for example, distribution of houses or distribution of money, decision making, or the use of the church, just to give you some examples. And then you ask the students about their positions on it. And there will be lots of different positions. Some people might say the distribution of house, we should just rotate it every week. The first week you get the big house, second week I get it. Some other people will say, well, we can sell the houses. The people who have lots of money, they can buy the house and give money to the community. Or there will be students who say, well, let's just draw lots, like equal chances for everybody. Same about the distribution of money or the decision making. You have lots of different positions in that first step. Then what's also interesting about the game, and also during that first part, you have lessons when you can change from that micro perspective, living in the village, to a macro perspective and talk about what you learned by introducing theories. And one theory that arises at the beginning is a policy circle. It's basically about three things. First one, there's a problem. Second one, how can we solve that problem? And third step is, how can we make a decision to solve the problem? And then probably by doing that decision, there's going to be a new problem. But that's somehow how politics work. And also, you can use video transcripts to show how different issues get supporters and to introduce a policy cycle. So the idea is not to give it out from a book, but for the students to discover it themselves. And there are lots of those questions. Also, the question that arises how frustrating arguments can be settled. So if there's not a solution in the first moment, how can you work on it so that you find an agreement that is somehow settling for everybody, but not by punching in the faces, but by being peaceful to each another. By the way, let me come back to Lord of the Flies. It's, for some who read it, it's very interesting because they fight and they do not find the conclusion on settling arguments peacefully. And then to wrap up the first step of discovery, it's about finding matches, but not in the Tinder way. It's about finding like-minded persons and to develop from the position matrix to a program matrix. And how do you do that? You have several what-if situations. For example, I will ask you, we won't do that right now because there's lack of time, but if you as a student, I would ask you to stand up, walk across a room, and I will give you a scenario. For example, imagine you have a community fund where all the money is in, and a student stole money from it. So that's a setting. And now I will ask you to walk around and talk to each other what you think of that student, what he is supposed, what you are supposed to do, what are your solutions for society to do with that student. And the idea is, as it says in the writing there, finding like-minded persons, because there are several of those what-if situations. And what's the magic part about it, you will notice that you will agree with the same people on different situations. And the idea is to sit together with those like-minded persons and then work on a program for the topic, for the issues you decided on previously. And that's why I put the picture in the background. Now we get into a kind of group working process where several groups start writing on a program. And with that step, the first big step of discovery is finished. I know it's probably very hard for you right now because I'm just rushing through the method, but maybe you get a little bit an idea of what the method aims at, and that's what I need you to understand for my second part in the presentation. Oh. All right, some technical problems. Sorry for that. What do I have to press for F5? Okay, I just do it like this. Sorry about that. Hmm? So the second step is about systemizing. The students got lots of impressions from the first discovery step, and now it's more about developing. How can we make process? Not to just stand there that there's confusion, that the result is politics is so complex and so difficult we cannot solve it, but now it's about systemizing the impressions. And it can be about what is left and what is right. All of you have an impression of what is left and what is right, but very often, well, you have a basic idea, but you do not know in detail what it is about. And the method provides a way to get a more detailed point of view of left and right. And it does it by doing a black and white drive. So there's the example of an everyday life in a commune, a very supposed to be left thing. And you can use like a newspaper that came into the village or a news broadcast that came into the village to confront the students with the life in a commune. And after that, they are supposed to find antipodes and add white moments to the left principles they got to know from the video. And by doing so, two key questions arise that are most discussed if you see the contrast from left and from right. It's one about the procedure in politics, so who decides, or the basic question how decisions are made. And the second one is about resources, because if the village wants to do something, it needs resources. It needs time from the villagers, or it needs money. So the question of with what can the decision be realized in order to implement actions. And that's where the political compass is introduced. As you can see, the presented sheet shall be used to demonstrate the step-by-step build-up of a map for politics. Therefore, two crucial questions in politics are used to coordinate our understanding of the way politics work. First is about the procedures. So who decides and how is the decision be made? And you have some polls on it. There can be everybody decides, as a student saw in the example of the commune, that is supposed to be left. And on the state level, it would be minimal state. So if everyone decides, well, everybody is a state. And it's about self-determination. And the antipode of it is that powerful persons decide, traditional authorities, and that leads us to a strong state. And that is supposed to be the antipode of the left thing, so it's maybe the right thing. And the second question, as I said previously, is about resources. It's about property, it's about money. Again, in the commune, the example the students got to know by the video podcast is that property is shared. There's some kind of social equality, political redistribution, so there's very small amount of poverty. And the antipode of it is that everybody keeps his or her property, that everyone has it to themselves. And you use those two key questions to introduce political ideologies that won't happen within one lesson, but it can happen after a little bit of time. And that's why I used the effect, because it demonstrates the time. Students will get an impression of, well, if everybody keeps his or her property and everybody is able to decide, that is called liberalism. And the main idea about it is to solve our problems, we need fair competition. Or to go to the diametrical opposite of it, if all property is shared and powerful persons decide, well, that's some kind of socialism. To solve our problems, everybody has to share. And students will get an idea of a political compass, that's what you call it. And the idea is to give some more input to that in order to, in this third step, apply it and solve problems while doing so. And that's why we need expertise to fill up the content of the compass. The student gets different ideas of how society can work. If they haven't done it before, they will start raising questions why things in the village are being organized one way or the other. And again, the mental way from the village to the nation state is not very far. You have the microcosm, which is the life in the village, and you have the macrocosm, and you can have those two levels interacting with each other. In that setting, you can give in fictive, as a teacher, you can give in fictive letters from the so-called experts. You can have Adam Smith or Karl Marx writing a letter to the village showing his impression of how society should work. And by that, going back to that slide, you can fill up the content of those ideologies. So from that very confusing map in the first part, with all those impressions being there, but not being able to be dressed in proper words, you'll get to a more detailed map about it, which is called the political compass. You get an idea of what is left, what is right. You'll get an idea about the content also, maybe by going with those favorite thinkers of each ideology. And you can also go as far as present the ideologic roots of political parties in the next step. You can say, well, in Germany, you know, in every country you have different parties representing somehow the different ideologies. And now the third step is to apply those ideologies to problems, because life in the village or life in a state, it means solving political issues peacefully. And also the method here has some ideas about it. For example, it gives in tasks. And the task is prepare one statement to the problems listed below, each from a different ideological point of view. And the setting is the following. Some people are consciously saving some of their money, while some others spend it on a vacation and don't have any savings. And now imagine Tobias, one of the students, who does not have any savings. He becomes sick and he needs to go to a hospital. What shall we do about the student? Shall we help him? Shall we lend him some money? Shall we say, well, you didn't save anything because you had a vacation 2 weeks ago and you spent all your money? And that's the aim of the method, to trigger some thinking process within the student. And maybe, most probably, the students, well, they are not crucial. They will say, of course, Tobias has to go to a hospital and we are going to give some money for him. But then we need to think about some kind of insurance, maybe. Maybe everybody has to pay in a general fund for the next time when somebody gets sick. There's some money for that scenario. And that's what you want the students to do. And you can end the game at a certain point. You have to do that in present-day schooling, because you cannot do that game forever. That's why Patrick limits it to like 26 hours. A possible end to an endless game, as I think, is for the students to find a preliminary position on the ideologies and support parts of the program. Or they can rewrite the program. They can design a new program. But the aim is to have the topics which they addressed in the first part about it, the different issues, redistribution of houses, how can we make decisions, how can we vote, and to agree on a program. Not all of them have to agree on it, but to find themselves together and say, well, we as a group support that aspect, and we support it because it's fair, because I think that's the right way society should work. And that's what democracy is about. So you get the students to somehow realize, as I said in the beginning, the great achievement of democracy, that is to live peacefully among each other, and also get some discussion culture into the group. So it's about becoming and being political in the classroom. And well, in the actual end of the game, you will have to do some final analysis. You will have to address the difference between states and villages, because clearly you cannot do anything on that village level. If it comes to international relations for state policy, it's very, very difficult to face that as a village. I mean, probably there are some ideas you can add to the game, but you need to make sure that all the students understood that life in a state, it is similar to live in a village, but it's not the same, because otherwise students might very easily get disappointed when they try to discover state politics and they suddenly realize, well, it's not at all as a village life. So to wrap that up as a conclusion, Patrick says students must get a chance to delve into civic and political experiences before diving into the first chapter of the civics or government textbook. By doing so, we could leave the dominant teacher-centered question-response scheme and enhance the students' chance to acquire a personal motivation basis to further develop their analytic and participatory skills. And as within a descriptive position on it, by now you can say the method is successful. Students and teachers give positive feedback. Students like to play the game, and teachers are very positive about the results. And you can also seeing the students continue debating over village topics in their free time, in between the lessons. And that's very interesting, I think, because obviously it must be some kind of good schooling if both students keep to do what you want them to do in class. And I think that's very interesting about the method. So now very shortly I will talk about specifics and difficulties. The teacher's role is being redefined, and those specifics say different from the schooling. Maybe all of us know it right now. He or she does not interact within the simulation, however, is ready to help whenever the students need its help. It is the teacher's responsibility to give impulses whenever needed. I talked about that. And simulation and reality do only work together when the students see a sense in the game. They need real questions with real decisions for the fictitious game. It is not easy to find those settings, but you have to keep in mind that it should be somehow serious. I mean, it is a game, yes, but it's not about... Well, you have to find a mixture from gaming character and intelligent input, as you may call it. Reflexivity is needed every now and then to enhance learning. Concrete impressions need to be transformed into general awareness. Because by reflection, students can learn the categories. Take, for example, the category power and discover how decisions are being done. I told you previously, it's the question of getting an idea what power means and what power means in that political context. Is it, when you take the video analysis, is it about better arguments, or is it about rhetoric skills maybe, or just powerful position of speaking louder? Those are things you can address with the reflexivity part. And one is also about emotions, and the game is very emotional. There are lots of things you can see, for example, disappointments, which I think can be very useful for learning if you address them right. Some students at the beginning, when they get the roll card and they notice, oh wow, I'm one of the rich students. First they think it's about money, and now they are in an advanced position. But when they notice, well, actually it's not all about money, and I cannot do so much, it's not like a Monopoly game, it's about working together, then they get disappointed. So you need always to be aware of those emotions and address them in the correct way. And now it's about difficulties of the game in present-day schooling. I read some of the reflections of the game when the professor did it in schools, and difficulties that arise almost every time is about time. Like schooling in Germany is based on 45, 90 minutes rhythm, and you can imagine after I presented you the method that some of those discussions, they're really lively. I think there's a lot in it which you can use for learning and teaching, but after 45 minutes, I mean, the bell that rings doesn't care if the discussion is really lively right now. It just rings, and then students go to the next class. So that's a problem. It's also a problem about techniques, because about technology. When I said you use video analysis for it, not all of the schools in Germany have like a video projector. So the teacher always has to think about what technology can I use, and that's a limiting factor somehow. Well, it's about the nature of the problems, the emotions, it's class atmosphere, imagination, depiction. Class atmosphere is linked to the village atmosphere. That's the last point from the teacher's perspective. It's somehow difficult for the teacher to be careful that the class atmosphere is not too much linked to the village atmosphere, because sometimes arguments arise and you're not able to settle them in 45 minutes. And then those conflicts from the village get transferred into the class. And then the other teachers are kind of mad at you because you're always, you give some toxic input to their students, as you can think. And then also finding problems which are close to the student minds is somewhat difficult, since the perspective of a teacher is sometimes different from the perspective of a student. And for students, they sometimes complain that everything is based on imagination, and I think I saw it on your faces when I was explaining the first step of the game. It's difficult to imagine everything to be fictitious. It's difficult for you right now to imagine you're a student in an island or in an autonomous village. So the students encourage in those feedback papers always to depict the village, to portray it in some way. And well, I asked myself, what are existing difficulties in practice? Those are the existing difficulties in practice. And the very interesting question about this, which brings us here to our conference room in Linz, is the Political Village 2.0 a way of developing this method? And that can maybe lead us there. It's a picture that Patrick depicted, and he showed it in the presentation I went to in my second year of schooling. He has somehow a depiction of the village. So you see the different houses. You see that those houses are in a poorer condition than those houses. You see the market space, a town hall, there's a church. You have some fields for growing crops and stuff. So that leads us, as I said, to the question if we can do something about it with the web. And that's the second part, which I will do right now. Are there any immediate questions which I need to answer because you didn't get the method at all? Because then if you didn't get the method at all, it might be complicated to follow me now. So that's kind of important that you don't need to understand everything, but if there are really big questions, yes?
I would like to, well, this is something that I really need to say, because I disagree with you on the fact that the teacher's role is not as important. I think the teacher's role in such a method is much more important than in traditional methods, because the teacher, what the teacher makes the difference between Robinson's Lord of Flies and a good outcome. If the teacher frames everything, all these abstract concepts like related to what is power, conflict, resource management, into a moral judgment framework.
Yes.
This is, I think,
I guess I can answer on it because I expressed myself not detailed enough. I think from a student's perspective, the teacher's role is less active. If I can we put it like this?
It's a kind of non-directive guidance.
Yes.
But it's a guidance. The teacher
yes, exactly.
is a role model. Is by the fact that he's there, the children are in a kind of safer environment.
Yeah, I agree with you. For the teacher, it's a lot of work, and he needs to be there on the point. It's something you cannot do while doing something else. It's a method that uses all your attention.
You have to be to have a certain distance, not to interfere with their game, to guide them in a directive.
Okay. But about the setting, everything is clear? All right, then I will follow with the second part of the presentation, and that is about this method and web-enhanced learning. Two main questions arise if you want to address the problem of this game and somehow a connection to the web. How would the village work technically and didactically? Because I think somehow if you have the game on the internet, it changes also what you can do with it didactically. And the second question is, what advantages does the Village 2.0 have? Because obviously there need to be some advantages, otherwise we wouldn't need to do the work. First of all, it's about reacting on students' and teachers' innovations. I think it can make the game better because it addresses the problems the teachers have. And secondly, it enables one to have a permanent microcosm because the game doesn't need to be ended after 26 hours. You can just have it in after a while, after you explained it, after you did all the work, you can have it available. And I will talk about this later. I see in it a way to lead to media literacy, and I see that it enables a cooperation to other subjects, and maybe that's also something really important we have to think about school in the future. But let me say at this point already that in order to solve problems, which I try to do by thinking about the method, we always create new problems. So it's a never-ending story. How could the village work technically? I think you could depict it in the web. It could be by somehow a picture like that. And then there must be similarities to a browser game and methods of digital classroom concepts. So there must be some ability to do some chatting. The teacher must have ability to upload materials, scenarios, little videos. It would be also useful to have some kind of voting design so that the students can do some polling in that browser game / classroom concept. I'm not very strong on the technical issues, so those are more or less my ideas, and or maybe in the later in the reflexive part in the feedback, Edgar's, or you can tell me if it's makeable technically. But I think if you have very complex browser games, it must be able to be done. Sure, and that I need to point that out again. So web design is no replacement for the content of the lessons. It can be an addition though, but it's not to replace the method from schooling to the free time internet doings of the students. Technically, it enables each student to participate, and I think to participate in a much more complex way than just in the classroom, because in the classroom you always have dominant students that somehow shut down the others. And even in that method, when it's about discussing, when it's loud, when it's about expressing our opinions, you always have some students that are really strong participating in it, and some others that, well, maybe they want to participate, but they are not eager to express themselves. Maybe they are not as good in expressing their opinion in front of a group. So I think there's technically some kind of advantage because everyone can participate. And the teacher's function about it must be as some kind of gatekeeper. He must be sure that only the students enter. He must somewhat be a supervisor and also have an eye on what is happening in the village. Already at that point, two main questions arise to me. It's the one that we also addressed here during our discussions. Do we need another platform? Don't we have them already in a ton with all those self-managing learning zones, and we have Facebook and lots of usernames and lots of things to do? So that's maybe a question that arises. And also the teacher will probably not be amused about the extra work he has to do with the technical design. Maybe, though, he sees the benefit as well. That's possible. And, well, as I said, the teacher can upload materials and scenarios, so that is somehow an advantage, since I said the technology in German schools is a problem. He can give in the transcript and upload them digitally. Then the students are maybe more enabled to do some qualitative research, to think about the argument structure that students use. That's all things you can do with a good technical design. Didactically, the work atmosphere is essential, but also a thing to work on in reflection, because that discussion as well arised here in Linz. We thought about, shall we censor the internet somewhat? And I guess it's same with my first point here. if it's some chatting function, students need to address themselves. Maybe they do that in a more free way when you leave it somewhat open, and then you can use it for reflection, how to behave in a social network. And I think it's an advantage to do that in a closed system, like the village would be a closed system just for the students in a class, than to discuss your behavior on Facebook, which the teacher can somehow not see or is not supposed to see. Especially at the beginning of the project, there needs to be a very close cooperation between contents of the lessons and contents of the web design. And that's very important to me because, as you saw, the method is quite complex. And you need to make sure as a teacher that all the students got the idea what the method is about. Only if you do that correctly in a proper way, you have the solid foundation to then go on and work with it. Thirdly, if you give, well, I call it intelligent input, some facts the student needs to know, like policy cycle and the ideologies, you need to do it, I think, in school, because maybe that's the only way you can make sure that all the students get the basic idea about it. And last point is that the digital classroom concept, in which I would use as a framework, can be used to enhance group work procedures. Let me illustrate on an example. You saw at the beginning in the agenda setting and on the writing and program thing, there's large parts of group work considered. You saw the same picture, some previous slides. And I think you can do that group work very well on the internet and use the internet to do your group work with. It does not always have to look like this. It can also look like this with all the students having a laptop in front of them. What's the additional benefit? For me, it's an opportunity to hand in additional scenarios after the minimum goals have been reached. I will illustrate that also on an example. Throughout the school year, you are facing lots of different topics in political education. And somehow you are also addressing actual present day happening political topics. So whenever you have that discussion and you want to break it down to a microcosm, which I think can be useful sometimes to understand the students what's going on, you can hand in additional scenarios. For example, should the village accept other juveniles that did crimes before and want to join the village? That is an actual discussion which can take place in the real politics. And if you would break it down like this, I think the students can have a lively discussion on it. If you address during this lesson of political education the system of representation, if you talk about revisions on it, for example, do some kind of should electronic voting, as we heard from Estonia, should be allowed into the political system. You can do the same discussion with your students in the village, but somehow it's more closer to them and they get more affected by the outcome of the discussion. So I think that's an additional benefit, because if you do not have the thing on the web, the political classroom model, the village model, it will be gone after those 26 hours. If the students leave the roads and they do something else, then it's very difficult to half a year later go back and say, well, now imagine being in the political village. I think it's more possible to do that when you have the microcosm available online. And it's also about internal differentiation. Some schools, I mean, you all know that there are students more or less interested in it, in the topic. And some schools use that village model to enhance political learning for interested students, for example, who participate in a student board. The students participating in the student board, they are really interested in politics and in the wider sense, in participation, in doing something for somebody else. Not all of the students have that strong feelings they want to do that. So you could use it to address a special group of students. And since that special group doesn't always need to be in one classroom, I think the village model online enables it to address those students more probably. Again, what advantage does the Village 2.0 have? It's about solving problems and creating new ones at the same time. Okay, you can read that, but it's the same sheet I had before, just to recall in your minds what what problems were there. And regarding the game parts, when discussion and group work takes place, the Village is a positive development if you have it online, because the rhythm is no longer needed all the time. Of course, you will address some parts of it during the lessons, and you will need to have those 45 minutes, 90 minutes framework in mind. But you can also have some of the discussion online, and then the time is not affecting you anymore that much. Technical issues can be simplified in the long run, as I said. It's able to upload materials more easy. It's also about processing the data. For example, when you have the transcripts of what the student said, you can apply it and process it more easy if it's online. As I said, you enable quiet students to play a more important role within the game. The student complained that the village is not depicted enough, and to have it online is more than just to have a simple image of it. You can actually enter the houses, maybe. You can enter the town hall. You have different possibilities of doing some voting. You can do some voting electronically. You can see how others see the topic and how also the voting behavior changes. Maybe when you write a very good point to the discussion, maybe then some people would vote differently. And I think it's much more easy to depict that online than to do it in the classroom, where you already have so much else going on. And last but not least, it deepens the process of delving into the micro world of constructing a society. That's what the game is about. And I think if you have it more depicted, this process of delving into is much more enhanced. And the last point I'm going to talk about in this presentation is enhanced media literacy. In Germany, there's a whole big discussion about how we can introduce media literacy into present-day schooling. And there are two opportunities doing that. First solution, every topic which there is gives some input to media literacy. So the music teacher is supposed to somehow address the problem of media literacy, as the politics teacher is addressed to do something about media literacy. And it's a good way, I think. The second way is to create a new subject about it, which can be useful, but then again, you add up on other things, and you cannot give the students more time to be in school. Then something else needs to be crossed out. So on this very project, I think it's a good opportunity to link media literacy and political education. So for me, media literacy, it's about three very general ideas. It's about self-reflective use of media, how to behave in a network, how to use media effectively to get done what I want to do. Second part is creation of media. It's again more this information technology stuff, but if you have a cooperation with subjects, then you can maybe create the village. You can add new buildings. This one I cannot do as a politics teacher because I do not have the competences for it. But if there's some cooperation with the information technology teacher, why not? I think students would be happy to also construct their own village. It must not be only information technology. It can also be like computer graphic arts kind of thing. Then very big point is ability to use the media, organize a group chat, work together on one text at the same time, learn skills to find appropriate information on topics, all that things. I mean, it's maybe very basic, but I didn't learn it in school, and as we said various times here in Linz, students today, they don't learn it in school, but they need to learn it. They need to learn how to use the media. And if they combine the ability of using the media and being self-reflective about the use of the media, I think then you can have a great learning process in that media literacy topic. This model is also linked to feedback culture, but that's a point that I didn't find in the literature about it. It's more about what we said here in Linz, that I think feedback culture is always important. It's not only linked to media literacy, but in that political village, of course, you can do some gaining in the process of how do I give feedback and how do I take feedback that I get from others. Because whenever you have a discussion going on, it's a little bit, you always get feedback. I mean, people like your ideas or they don't like your ideas, but it's about, well, how do I take it? Do I get mad about it that somebody didn't like my ideas? Or do I start thinking about, well, what do I have to do different if they don't like my idea? Maybe I have to express myself differently. Maybe I have to change the content I'm addressing. There are different parts of feedback culture, and I think that's why I have it on this slide. Feedback culture can also be very useful to be addressed in the Village 2.0, even though, that's my point, it's not only linked to media literacy. So as a short conclusion, I think the Village is a great possibility to start a learning process while using the Web 2.0. You can solve pragmatic problems, which I showed, hopefully, to you understandable, to take the problems that already exist at the method and then try to solve it. And that's my personal opinion. I think it's also a good or even better way to achieve the functions of the game. If you consider what I try to explain to you what the method is about, I think you can very well get it done with the internet. And then it's, as I just said, also about media literacy, and it's about having different modes of working. You have some parts in which you give, as a font teacher, input to the students, but it's also about media literacy. It's about the student working on himself. Carlos, you talked a great deal about project-based learning. I think that's somehow related to it, because students need to think about how they get their tasks done. And it's about, well, learning to learn. I mean, school is always about learning to learn, but that's a method, a concrete method that applies it. And of course, there's also the social interaction with others, which students need to learn. And I think it's a good opportunity to combine those three modes of working and contribute to a good result. Last slide here is the exemplary nature of it. Because while I was working on it, I thought, well, actually, it's kind of, for myself, it was a good way to approach the problem. How we can use the modern media in schools. It's about integrating media literacy into everyday schooling. It's also about how technology can help to make our everyday life more easy. It shows a way of internal differentiation, which becomes, I think, more and more important in in today's schools. And as I just said, it's a way to gain social, cognitive, and methodological knowledge. So, thank you, Toby, for taking that picture. It's a beautiful terrace outside our door. I am eager to first maybe answer your question and then turn to the back channel, or we can combine it. All right. It blogs. All right. Do we start up or at the end? How can we do that? All right. I share the first comment. I thought that a lot during the conference. Maybe there's no best method to do teaching, but to be a good teacher is about to know all the methods and the approaches, and then choose which one can be used to get the task done. And for the aims of the games that I presented, I think to delve into the process of creating society, being at the start of political education, I think some form of constructivism is a very good approach. Everyone's opinion matters, of course. That's what students must learn when they talk about politics. Yes, elections. reflect on your role in society. That's pretty much about it. And also the setting of the village, it tries to address those topics because, well, there's a church and students can also discuss how to use the church. It's all about religious freedom. How can we use that building? Because some students, they do not want to go there for worship and they want to go there for spending their free time. And I think it's also about tolerance, respecting one another and learning to respect one another's wishes. Suitable age group. Well, I mean, I did it with 8th graders as I presented this, actually as a start into political education. And the students are very motivated about it. I think if you just would have given them a book and give them the definition of politics about who gets what, when, and where, who cares? I mean, you need to feel it. That's what politics should be about. Of course, there's another side of political education as well. But I did it with 8th graders. Of course, you can do it with older students as well. I mean, I probably could do it with all of you, and you would learn something on it. So, age group is very, very wide, I guess. It depends on how you do it, and what scenarios you hand in, and how complex you do the village. I also know that in practice, you can do that in 1 week, and probably it's going to be very successful. But again, it's a pragmatic question because in school you do not have that often project weeks, and if you have the project weeks, then the students get all mixed up in different classes. In that scenario, as I presented him, it makes sense to have one class standing in front of you because you want to work with the class and you want to use it during the previous steps of political education. But the professor, he also does that 1 week kind of thing where he works with you for 1 week, and it's really successful. There are different political simulation games for children as well as for students in higher education. The time needed can vary from a few hours to several weeks. Some of these are even on an international level, depending on who organizes simulations. Is that a question, or I think it's rather a comment, isn't it? One of the best political games in Latvia is Parliament Against Mafia. I don't know that game. I've researched like some browser games about the topic, but my impression was that they do not get the same aims done as what is political education about. But I'm eager to have a look at it. Fighting is not an option. It's forbidden within the rules, I suppose. It would be very interesting, of course, but then, I mean, you can imagine parents calling your phone 24/7 when fighting is allowed. But also, I think it's important to notice that the students, they don't lose their students' role completely. I mean, and we are just also focused in doing and in obeying rules, so the students, they will not jump out of the rules of being there and being in school at all. It's a little step into more control.
That's within rules of real life, and not going out the real life rules.
Yes, you can say it like this. Thank you. I was wondering if the whole curriculum in school should be taught in such a game-based simulation. Is that related? I guess it's related to political education. Well, I try to show that I think it can be very useful to address problems on a micro-learning scale. But then again, how can I do the whole international relations stuff within such a framework of such a game? I think some problems about political education are not to be answered within such a framework.
Maybe not in that special framework, but there are, if I remember it right, there are also international simulations.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, you have the Model United Nations. Some of you know maybe where you can represent a country and you come together. It's a very, very good thing. I did it myself, and you learn a lot. And I think you even learn more when you take part in one of those game methods than when you read a definition or some school book about international relations. So, linked to the Horizon report, rethinking how school works. Well, I guess that's what all of us do every day when we want to go into teaching. Thomas said it the other day, all of us have some kind of visions and somehow see maybe possibilities to improve school. Maybe it's not always suitable to follow up on reality, but I guess all of us that are sitting here, we are somehow interested in how we can develop schooling. So, yep, good point. And maybe the game called Minecraft can be used. I'm not an expert on Minecraft, but how does it work with the rules system? Besides the problem that's an open system, and I think, again, it's advantage to do that with a class and to also address some problems in school. I mean, it's not games that's only taking place in the internet. So the way I know Minecraft, I don't think it's suitable to get all the things done which I tried to point out during my presentation, but I think it can be used as some kind of mental framework. Maybe the game, when it's created, should be similar to Minecraft in the technical matter. Check out this exhibit, make a gallery. All right, I will. Thank you for the comment. So are there any other questions? Do you see maybe a relationship to your topics that you presented? Maybe that's a question you can face on your own. But for myself, when I overworked my presentation yesterday, I got several good ideas about it that I can somehow link in my mind to that project. So for me, here in Linz, it was a very good thing to be at. Also, some good ideas that I will take with me to hopefully do that in practice in 2 years.
Can I just ask a question? Is there already some plan, or do you know any project which tries to do it in real?
I thought about
realize it.
You have a topic for a new project.
Yes, I do have some. Yeah, it was interesting because I addressed the professor before I came to Linz, because I wanted to present him my ideas and have for you a little comment on my presentation, what he thinks about it. And he answered me that there are lots of problems about copyright because it's his idea, and he doesn't like games in political education like in the internet. So he said we can maybe talk on the phone about it, but he is very skeptical about it. And also he doesn't have time because he is eager to sell his ideas, and he is actually traveling, and so it's his copyright. I think what I thought afterwards is you can easily change the setting. I mean, it doesn't need to be a village, it can be an island as well. So maybe then it's not his copyright anymore. I know, because he obviously he did that setting, the rule book, and what I presented you, the table with discover and systemize and apply. All those are his ideas, but still he is not the first one who thought about a setting like Lord of the Flies.
Sure, the book, you may get some experience from this book, not from the professor. So
yeah,
there is the start and the end of this idea.
So probably you would also have to work with some kind of.
If it's such kind of project as Thomas asked, I think you should manage to put with you some educators, some programmers and designers, and it will become for a good project, I think. Because I'm in another project that I'm doing tomorrow, maybe, and we're creating such kind of things using technical and educational aspects. So it's a good idea.
All right. Well, I take that as a compliment.
I see the future of this idea if it's usable. If others are saying that it's okay and it's.
Again, for me, the most interesting part about it is to link media literacy to it, because we need to somehow introduce students to use their technology not only to chat on Facebook, but to make their everyday life more easy. And I think that's a good idea of showing them and teaching them and make them to learn how they can do that successfully. So
you don't know any
I don't know any project. I did a little research on it, but all the games that I found on it were not based in a school framework. So, because I have in mind a cooperation between in-school learning and in-school lessoning, talking about what's happening online. I mean, you can probably also change that, but I don't know any projects about school and internet and the political village.
It's kind of interesting. But I think that it should be some kind of platform for gaming, that you shouldn't make it from the direct zero, but put on the platform. There should be technical things already, I think. I don't know, but it should be.
Okay, are there any more questions? Anything? All right, then thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much for this great presentation. We are running a little bit of time from because right now it's 12. To make right now the next presentation will take us through too much time because then we are late for lunch. The problem today, the frame that we have for today is that we have to leave the room at 5 o'clock in the evening because there's another stuff going on here underneath the whole 13th floor here. So we can't probably have to leave before 5. My idea or suggestion for just came up right now, we could make the break earlier. And if you agree, we will also start a little bit earlier. I don't know if we will be able to squeeze it 2 presentations to 5 o'clock. It depends a little bit on the presentation. And of course, nobody has to feel somehow squeezed. We have a little bit of more or less empty slot for tomorrow, but I actually just wrote some names there. But we could switch it to Saturday. So there's a little bit of freedom that we have. So my idea is that right now we will, I don't know, you need 1.5 hour lunch break, or we could break it up to an hour. Because if everybody could agree on that, then we have enough time to finish the 5 o'clock. So in that case, I would say we will see each other again here at 4 o'clock. And then we probably will be able to finish it. Thank you.